Looks like almost the same people that were here yesterday are here today. And I don't know if I need to go through our company slides again of who we are and what we are, but we'll begin here in a few seconds. And Vineet, are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Todd, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And since I'm the second speaker, I can hear myself pretty good. Mohammed, can you hear me good?
Loud and clear.
Thank you, sir. And we're looking for Jordan. Where are you, Jordan? Hopefully he joins us. And we'll get started.
Okay.
With that, welcome to our second session, day 2. Yesterday, we had an amazing discussion and presentations from Royce DeMello, Molly Ellenberg, and Irfan Yar, and Stuart Ripon-Ness. We appreciate all the information that they had delivered to us yesterday and all the questions that were asked by the audience. We hope we get the same interaction today. We did have a little bit of an issue with one speaker leaving us today that can't make it, but we've adapted and overcome that. So I'd like to welcome you to the Global CT Institute panel discussion, our series on countering terrorism, violence, and extremism. And today's topic is on countering the financing of terrorism. And there's 2 different aspects to this. And I think some speakers will touch on the AML portion, and some speakers will touch on the operational countering of financed terrorism, the CFT, CTF, however you want to say it, on the other side of that. And so with that, I want to welcome everyone today. This venue will be recorded, as it is now. It will be available to all paid registrants, being able to view it later. We want to make sure that you get the maximum amount of information out of this. I know sometimes presentations can be long and boring, but the majority of the time, if you rewatch them, you learn something new, at least I do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. That is Mr. Mohammed Omar. He is the current Director of Criminal Justice Programs at our Institute. He has served in the police for nearly a decade in the United Kingdom. Mohammed is an expert in security risk management, investigation, security operations, operational policing, loss prevention, asset protection. He is bilingual in Swahili. He has his MBA, his Bachelor in Science in Policing Investigations, Level 5 Corporate Risk and Crisis Management, and a certified anti-terrorism specialist. He has fantastically agreed to help us moderate this. So he's done our last couple presentations. So thanks, Mohammed, for agreeing to do this one. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, and good evening, good morning, everyone. Welcome back again. And hopefully, we hope we have an interesting session today. And thanks again to all our speakers who have agreed to participate in this presentation. So today is about terrorism and financing. And just in brief, the financing activities of terrorist groups fall into 3 broad categories: raising, spending, storing, and moving. To raise funds, terrorist groups employ various methods: direct or state-sponsored support, individual donations, criminal activity, trafficking, smuggling, extortion, fraud, use of charities, use of legitimate businesses, use of and smaller self-funded networks. Once funds have been raised, they will be spent or distributed locally, stored or moved to another location. It is important to note that extortion in territories that terrorist groups control may often be presented as a legitimate taxation. Methods for storing and moving funds include physical movement, use of international trade systems, alternative remittance systems, offshoring, use of safe havens, failed states and state supporters, use of cryptocurrencies, and use of charities. To move funds, money laundering techniques are often used. The process of money laundering has 3 key stages: placement, layering, and integration. Placement, it is the injection of cash into the financial system. Layering is the use of transactions to obscure ownership. Integration is in the return of clean monies to a beneficiary. We have our speaker, who is Vinith. He will be talking about how funds are raised, stored, and moved. Let me give you his brief background. Vinith Venugopal is an experienced KYC and compliance professional. He has experience over 7 years in EMA and APAC region and worked with organizations like HSBC, Societe Generale, and KPMG. He has an expertise in quality assurance, regulatory requirements of EMA and APAC regions. He has been part of different pilot projects relating to PEP KYC. He holds a master's in business administration from Vishwara Technological University in India and a bachelor's in business administration from Karnataka University in Dharwad. He's well organized with professional, diversified experience in client onboarding and periodic review and governance, with special focus on AML and KYC in the financial services. He is a result-oriented specialist who works well in a team environment and independently. Strong interpersonal skills, ability to resolve the problems and conflicts, learn quickly and adapt to the new methods and ideas, effective interaction with the internal and external customer, as well as all level of management. May I introduce Vinith to present on the subject this evening. Welcome, Vinith.
Thank you, Omar. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. So I will just share my window. Thank you, Omar, for so I thank Todd and others for giving me this opportunity to share some information on terrorist financing. So let us begin. So here we are here to discuss on terrorist financing, and I'm here to deliver on few basic information on terrorist financing and on the background and its process. So what terrorist financing means? As FATF defined the terrorist financing as that facing the terrorist, financing of the terrorist acts and terrorists and terrorist organizations. It doesn't mean directly we have to the person involved is directly financing or indirectly. If he is lending his asset for the terrorist activity, then it is called as terrorist finance. So in a simple term, what we can say, so terrorist financing is raising, moving, and storing and using of financial resources for the purpose of terrorism. So we may think like why terrorist organization need financing. So there are reasons. Firstly, to sustain the operations of the organization. There are numerous activities for the organization, and to conduct those activities, they need funding. So that is the basic reason why the terrorist organization has to be financed. The second reason is to fund the activities of the operatives, of the individual operatives in countries of the event. Maybe like if they are attacking, or if they are planning the event, so they need resources, and they have to plan, and they have to buy some arms and ammunitions. So for those activities, they need funding. And the third is the social services. Why terrorist organizations will do social services? Social services is to gain, they will do the social services to gain the people, the local people, confidence, because they want to look good in those in the eyes of the local people, and also in the vast diaspora of people who are from that country. And they believed in the organization. And the fourth point here is the propaganda and recruitment. They will be having, the terrorist organization will be having some their own propaganda, and to communicate well, through magazines and to radio channels and to media houses, they need funding. And to recruit the people from the other countries, and also to train the recruited people, they need funding. And the last point, the salaries for the members of the organization for serving. So these are the reasons why the terrorist organizations or the terrorist needs funding. Okay, so, and going forward, we will see like what and how the terrorist financing is done. So the terrorist financing cycle has 4 stages, and maybe you all have known, like the professional sports. And in the professional sports, we will be discussing like how the player is playing. We will be discussing like how fast and the controlled consistent pace he will be playing. So in the same way, the terrorist financing will be happening. So the terrorist organizations will be fast, and also they will be operating the cycle in a consistent, in the constant pace. Because if the finance is low, if the flow of the funds is low for the organization, then all the events which are planned by the terrorist organizations will be failed. Hence, so this is the 4 stages which are observed. The one is collecting. The main aim of the organization is to collect the funds. Second is the storing. Here, all the collected funds will be stored, and the third is moving of the funds. Here, the funds will be moved from the source of origin to the source of distribution from the various sources. And third, the last one is usage of those funds. So what mediums or what channels they will be using for these stages, we'll be seeing further. So first stage is the collection, as I told. So in the collection stage, so the sources, the fund can be raised in the 3 sources. So one is the legitimate and the illicit sources, and the third is the state sponsorship. So what are the mediums where they arise in the legitimate sources? The direct donations. Here there will be people who will be believing in the terrorist organization propaganda, or the system, or the system, what they will be saying. So the people will be donating on behalf of them for the terrorist organization, maybe from the individuals, maybe the entities. All this they will be donating for the organization, and for them the source will be their daily wages and their daily the income from their legitimate business. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is the crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is done through various sources. Maybe they will be doing by using the channel called social media, from the like Facebook. So they will be posting, for example, they will be posting in a particular group saying that saying that if they are collecting donations for building a church or building building hospital, so and all the people around in the group are from the same country, they will be donating for this for this motto. But the real motto behind this event is different. It is the terrorist activity. And also they will be using the crowdfunding websites where they will be they will be showing a different reason why they are raising money, but the utilization of the fund is for the terrorist activity. And the last is in the illegitimate sources is the commercial enterprises. So many terrorist organizations, they will be owning illegitimate businesses like media house, a dance bar, or a pub, or where other businesses where the where the cash intensive business is more. So that type of sources, that type of businesses they will be using. And also they will be taking a share in a part of ownership in a in an organization where there will be a cash intensive. Okay. And the second part here is the illicit sources. That is, first one is taxation. So maybe you are wondering, like, taxation is done by the government, but why it is illicit source here? Here, the terrorist in some areas, there's a terrorist organization will be imposing a taxation or a certain they will be taking the money from the businesses and also from the individuals for to living their daily life. So that is taxation. That is started by the for example, ISIS has done it. And the extortions and the drug and human trafficking, and also hijacking the and storage of oil and gas and precious stones which are available in that particular country. And based on the research, like, drug and human trafficking is the most contributing resource for the terrorist financing, because that creates a more income from that is the most important resource for the terrorist financing. And the last one is the state sponsorships. As we have seen yesterday, we had different eminent speakers which they have told from the terrorism does not exist. It's not as yesterday's thing. It has come over the years. So there also we can see that the state sponsorship has been done, and now also it has been doing. If a country is not it is not well with other country, the enemy country, they will sponsor an organization and create a havoc in other countries. So this is the state sponsorship. This happened like the Iran is doing the state sponsorship for the organization where it is creating the activities in the Israel. Going forward, now the fund has been collected, but where it will be stored? So first one is the charitable institutions or the non-profit organizations. This is the main place where the terrorist organizations store their fund which is collected. And it is also a collection point where they collect the money by telling the humanitarian or any other reasons, but the use of the funds is for the terrorist activities. And also they use the shell or the friend companies will be used for the same storing of the funds. And the third one is cash warehousing. As we have seen in the drug cartels will do, where they pack the bundles of money, and they will be storing the cash in the jungles, and also in deep warehouses where it is where it is not traceable. And they also, and nowadays, as the terrorist organizations are uh, very technologically advanced, they store all the money which is collected in the cryptocurrencies. And the next is they buy the art and antiques, and also oil and gas, and they store it and they smuggle it. And also they use the financial accounts or the bank accounts to conceal the funds. They will store in a small portions, and they will conceal the money. And the third stage is moving. So we have seen the funds are collected from the different sources, maybe legitimate, no illegal sources, and it is stored in different mediums. And now it has to move from the source to the destination where the terrorist activity has to happen, or where the training activity or the organization, it has to reach the organization. So the first is banking and financial institutions. So this is the most used medium to move the funds. So the moving of the funds is done. Is also, for the moving of the funds, they use the money laundering techniques. So here the terrorist organization will conceal the origin of the money by distributing or by depositing the money in a smaller amounts in a different in different accounts. And then it will be transferred from the offshore. They will be using the offshore accounts for concealing the amount, and they will be transferring to the organization account. And also they will be using the loans, and also trade finance will be used to move the funds. And the second point here is the hawala. The hawala system will also be used for the moving of the funds. This is the oldest technique, and it is still in use, where a person A will be contacting a hawala person in a country A, and saying that this X amount has to be moved, or has to be distributed in country Y. So then the hawala person will be contacting another hawala person in the country Y, and he will be distributing the same amount in the same currency. Here there will be no physical exchange, or there will be no physical movement of the currency from country A to country B, but the funds will be moved. And the third here is money movers, or the bulk cash couriers. So they here the bulk cash, or the cash will be couriered from the country to country. Maybe it will be done via ships, and also from the air it will be done. And for example, there in Brazil, there was for a non-profit organizations, they received bulk cash transfer, bulk cash couriers from a country which is in high risk jurisdictions. And it was when it was reported to the financial FIUs, from the investigation, it was came to know that the cash couriers were from the high risk jurisdiction, and it was for the terrorist activities. And the wire transfer is most used in this in this current age, where the money is transferred from X to Y person, and it will within no time, but the identity of the person will be not traced. And the third and the latest is the prepaid cards or the travel cards. Here the prepaid cards are also used for the moving of the money. For example, a person in a country X, the person will be purchasing a prepaid card, and he will be giving the credentials to the person who is based in the high risk jurisdiction, or the place where the terrorist activity has to be done. There the person Y will be taking the credentials of the prepaid cards, and he will be using the card for the terrorist activities, or to buy weaponry and other things. And also cryptocurrencies will also be used to move the funds. Here it will be done by the third party, and also where the identity of the sender or the receiver will not be traced. And also the main point here is, for the moving of the funds, the terrorist organizations will be using mostly unregulated institutions. And also here, and also in some instances where the money service business will also be used for the moving of the funds, and the person and the people working will all be in most of the instances will be knowingly or unknowingly will be helping the terrorist organizations to move the funds. So why the moment of after moving of the funds, where the funds will be used? As I said earlier, the funds will be used for the running the organization, and the second here is the hiring and training the new recruits, and the planning and executing the attacks, and salaries for the members of the organization, and to do social service. So for these purpose, the funds will be used. So this is the information which I wanted to convey, and thanks for the opportunity. So if there are any questions, so I'm open for
that. Thank you, Vinith. Any questions regarding that? And very interesting subject, just to start our session today. Any questions? Okay. All right. There's a question from James McAllister. Any more information about cryptocurrency?
So mainly the cryptocurrency. Like what information? Like
I think it's probably how cryptocurrency is being used to fund the terrorists.
So cryptocurrencies are used in many ways. Basically the cryptocurrencies are here will be used to exchange. Will be exchange in the dark web, where they will be using for the weapons and other things. And also in the cryptocurrencies, as it is not regulated, the person who is sending and the receiving will not be will not be screened, and the source of funds and the source of wealth will not be known in that cryptocurrencies. And as it is not regulated, it is very vulnerable for the terrorist financing. And it is done through the dark web, and also and there was a website where the only cryptocurrencies are used for to buy weaponaries online. So this is how the cryptocurrencies are very vulnerable for terrorist financing.
Okay, I think there's another one. Thanks for this presentation for Giolome. What is the part the most efficient to fight from your point of view?
So the most important point part is played by the AML and also AML investigators, and also the transaction monitoring analyst, and also from the regulators point of view, regulators also in the case of cryptocurrencies. But in all other cases, AML analyst will be the main person who will be checking the transactions. In if for example, in a charitable institution, if they see a series of transactions which are not linear, or which are not related to the what the charitable institution is doing. For example, if it is aim is to provide education, but it is sending money for some X country which is a high risk country, so then we have to then it has to be reported for the FIU, financial intelligence units, and it has to be investigated. And also regulators, currently the regulators are working on it, but it has to be robust, and it has to be very it has to come in a speed way where the cryptocurrencies are regulated, and also the source of the funds has to be and also the KYC has to be made mandatory for the cryptocurrencies. And also for the transaction monitoring also, if the company is a shell company or the friend company, and it is used for the terrorist activity, like if it is a dormant account from long years, or there is a sudden spike of a inflow of funds, then the transaction monitor has to kick in, and the bank's transaction monitor has to kick in, and the AML analyst has to find out like whether this is a true activity, or it's a illegal activity which is transferring of the funds. So here the AML analyst and the banks and the technology of the banks, and also the regulators play a very important role in limiting financing the terrorist organization, or eradicating the financing of terrorist organization.
Okay, thank you. Just quick questions. With regards to someone working in a business, or as a security expert, or just in the security industry, or even running a company, what indicators could start highlighting of this money laundering, or indicators that can start raising red flags? What indicators will need to start flagging up that there's someone is involving with terrorist financing? Just some examples.
Is that an open question for the group, or for Vineet?
Vineet, yeah.
Yeah. So, Mohammed, so the First one is the sudden spike of the funds, inflow of the funds, and the second one is when the bank is onboarding or reviewing the client, so they will see the ownership and how the ownership is there, like if it is ownership is concealed where the client is not ready to give the ownership, then that is also an indicator. And the client is not providing this source of fund or source of wealth of the beneficial owner, then it is a trigger. And in a real-time transactions, in a real-time transaction, as I told, the first one is the flow of funds. Second one is the flow of funds from point A to point B. What are the countries like, and what is it is routine or it is unusual behavior of the unusual behavior. And also the third point here is where the country, the company, the business is the client is doing a computer sales and service, but it is receiving money for transporting some for other business. Then it's a trigger, because it's not a nature of business of that particular client, but it is receiving money for some other activity. That is also a trigger. These are the points where while in the case of onboarding, and also in ongoing business of a client, which triggers which are the points which has to be considered as a major triggers for these terrorist financing or for money laundering activities also.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Vinith. There's no further questions. We'll move on to our next speaker, Mr. Todd Price. Todd is a retired U.S. Army Infantry Logistics non-commissioned officer and retired United States Property and Fiscal Office Commodity Manager. In 1992, he started a military career in the U.S. Air Force as an F-15 aircraft weapons maintenance technician. He completed his career in 2016 in the Oregon National Guard as a training and operations NCO, dual status federal technician commodity manager. He's a lifetime learner with an AS degree in criminal justice and computer science, as well as Bachelor of Science in Criminology and minor in Psychology and Military Science. He completed the requirements for Masters in Business Administration in Data Analytics and Business Intelligence at Southern Oregon University. He has also completed several internships with Oregon Legislative Advisor for students, as well as recovery centers for youth and adult treatment programs. He was a founding father of the Associated Students of Rugged Community College, Medford campus in 1998. He has also created the Oregon Community College Students Association internet website platform in the year 2000 to link all 17 community colleges together to share information for an appropriate and effective education collaborative forum. He was the 2001 recipient of the Oregon Community College Outstanding Student Scholar Award from Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber. He is a current founder and CEO of the Global Counter-Terrorism Institute, helping to grow collaboration between countries to improve international relations with practical solutions to countering violence, extremism, and terrorism in an online educational development solution and new technologies in global information systems and advanced information system. Today, he's going to present the strategies and stages and modus operandi involved in terrorism financing. Welcome, Mr. Todd Price.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Vinith, for your presentation. We try and make sure that when we do these seminars and these panel discussions, that the intent is to follow with questions so we don't try to overlap within the speakers. So I will try my hardest not to do that. As Mohammed stated, I'm a lifetime learner. I firmly believe in collaboration. With guns, you kill terrorists. With education, you can kill terrorism. Malala Yousafzai she's I guess, a very important part of why I became a criminologist in the beginning, and why in the end I see an effective strategy that the only way to make change necessary is within the business world. Counterterrorism is, with a certain amount of education, philosophy, research, we can achieve anything. And so today I'm going to present on the strategies, stages, and the modus operandi or method of operation. And so I will not talk more than an hour and 40 minutes. As you can see, the table of contents, and I will just get right into my presentation. 13 October 2020, the Undersecretary, the United Nations Center for Counterterrorism launched a new global capacity building program. And for me as a leader, I always believe in the moral law, and I strictly adhere to methods and discipline. And then that I know is in my power to control success, and regardless of what I do. Whether it's training soldiers to send them off to battle, or managing congressional appropriations after Congress passes a bill, the Senate approves it, and the state comptroller gets their part of the pie. Managing money and supervision go together. And to me, that's what, as we go through this presentation, you'll see that there are 205 members totally, and these are stakeholders within the Foreign Action Task Force. And also within the United Nations, there's 195 countries. 3 of them are member nations and 2 are non-member states. So what is terrorism financing? Well, we know that terrorists are continuously evolving their ability to diversify and renew not only the source of their funds, but the channels and instruments they use to transfer those funds. For me, as I've said, you can have as many financial intelligence units in the countries, law enforcement entities, intelligence services, and you can have as many United Nations resolutions as possible, but unless you do a risk-based assessment in each country on the ground, the only thing we're going to talk about is at the 30,000-foot level. And that's usually what does happen. We talk and talk and talk at the 30,000-foot level. And as of yesterday, USAID had to send in its humanitarian disaster assistance in Tigray because of the genocide that's happening there. And so for me, I know that a risk-based assessment in a country is a starting point, and having that risk management framework within each economy, because each economy is different within each country. And that framework involves identifying all the associated risk, assessing everything, having a complete understanding, and that may come by way of gaps analysis, and then you must take action. Sometimes that's hard power, and sometimes that's soft power using a diplomatic approach. This framework is pretty simple. Most people are unaware of the ISO standards. Some in manufacturing are in the green belt initiative. The ISO 31000 risk management framework is a set of components that support risk management throughout an organization. And there are many countries that are involved in this non-governmental organization. The problem is when technology outruns governance. And right now, the AML CTF industry is about governance and compliance. And so using this framework, there are approximately 160 countries right now that use this framework, including ones that we're going to go through in the next slide. So with that, the Foreign Action Task Force guidance, they have their own framework with national money laundering and terrorism financing and risk assessments. The World Bank also uses one. We actually bid on a project in Jamaica not too long ago. National security strengthening is a project in many countries right now, especially in developing nations. And basically what that is the education is needed within the policing, in some of the constabulary forces, And within doing that, they also use, the World Bank uses a risk assessment for lending countries money. And so that's why it's important to understand, even if you're doing business in another country, what these frameworks are, how they work. And the EU uses a supranational terrorist financing risk assessment they came up with in 2017 after recent attacks. And then the US also, the National Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment was developed. There are some existing terrorist risk assessments, and in the military, any soldier will tell you that the commander uses a risk model before they do anything in training or in combat. You have to be able to identify these things, your risks. The IMF uses a national risk assessment methodology on anti-money laundering also. That methodology for assessing money laundering and the financing risks that affect the internal markets, because ultimately it's the economies that get affected in countries that have these risks. And so part of that, I believe it was back in 2015 when the fourth AMLD came out, the directorate, and I think I'll talk about the sixth directorate in the next slide. These new challenges that were, I think they're coming in effect in June of this year. They define all 22 predicated money laundering offenses, because in the past, even terrorists, there's not even a universal definition for terrorism. However, in specific areas, there will be predicated offenses and they'll be able to define these. There's also trainings that are being developed in recognizing these, just like the red flag indicators. And I believe the Foreign Action Task Force just came out last year with a really good training on these red flag indicators. Also, it covers aiding and attempting to commit money laundering and how that'll be an offense. And it provides a comprehension definition of money laundering. There is a difference between money laundering and terrorism financing, and I'll go into that in a little bit. It also extends criminal liability to legal persons. Well, there are legitimate ways of laundering money, and there are illegitimate ways of laundering money. And being caught is the difference. Aggravating circumstances can be applied for convictions relating to serious offenses, such as corruption and human trafficking, just like Vineet talked about. Bosses may be personally liable for corporate crimes. I don't think I've yet to see, other than the Enron scandal way back when, most corporate crimes with companies are usually settled by DOJ. Rarely do you see anyone getting banned if they're a CFO or a CEO. Rarely do you see them getting banned in the financial world anymore or from going to the next company. As a matter of fact, many embezzlement, corruption charges, they just get settled, they plead their case, and then that person moves on to another entity and does the same thing all over again. And so the penalties for laundering money could also include prohibition from public work benefits, bans from conducting businesses, or forced wind-up of businesses. And however, remember, this is coming out from the UK and from the US in both of their new policy strategies. But how's that gonna work in developing nations? And so the other thing most people rarely talk about are the individuals themselves that are on the front lines doing this. These individuals are adverse to change. Some of that is because they're afraid of losing their jobs. It may require retraining. They may be moved to a different department or team. And we recently did a gaps analysis for a college in Indonesia and revealed half of the teachers didn't know how to use the technology needed to move into that next level of educating their students. And so we did find, that they didn't have the ability to do the job that they were hired to do because of the pandemic. So that was one effect we saw. They also have to carry out new or additional functions or have to use new technologies. And doing a gaps analysis in your organization will help you to see some of these events. Now, recently there was the new communication from the EU on their anticipate, prevent, protect, and respond strategy. This came out in September of 2020. And I reviewed that along with the current 2017 Department of Homeland Security their model. And they are similar in anticipate, prevent, protect, and respond versus the 4 goals of the 2017 Department of Homeland Security in their strategy. However, the strategies do one thing. They form a collaboration now between these 2 large organizations, the US and the UK. However, those strategies differ in how they go about funding. Social online platforms, regulations, and sanctions for counterterrorism and countering violence extremism run into violations of freedoms of speech in certain areas. So that's something they have to address. Next is the hyperbole and misinformation from narrative strategies that are being influenced on social media, just like Vineet talked about. These narratives for recruiting and stuff like that, they're just pervasive. And then the terrorist financing tracking program, I opined a little while ago that US DOJ awarded 14 companies awards to develop, because the clearinghouse is all running through Tennessee this year and for the next 5 years, DOJ is able to better manage and monitor these suspicious activity reports, these STRs. And so what's happening is the US has the ability through sanctions to reach out and touch people a lot more and to see what they're doing. There's new patterns and software that are being developed. One of our affiliates, a company out of San Francisco, Amberone, has actually been awarded through their software platform to be able to, through DOJ, through lists that are out there now, and through suspicious transactions and previous reports, culminate to see these people and how they're actually doing things to move money and to store money. One of the comments I made on my reflection of these 2 different pillars are one of removal of hate speech. Yesterday, we got to see identity in Islam. We've seen in the USA that removal of hate speech was necessity during the election cycle. However, it created more hostility. So there needs to be a balance in what's happening with preventing and prior planning in some of these things. And the reintegration of foreign fighters, I think people should pay more attention to that. Like Molly talked about yesterday, there are instances where, even though if you follow the Yazidis in the Sinjar Mountains in 2015, the massacre that happened, 3,000 women and children that were kidnapped, that happens more times than really anyone wants to pay attention to. And if every day you turned on the news and that's what you saw, how affected would you be? Would you want to jump on that cause? So, outlining these new strategies is helpful. Again, they're at the 30,000 foot level. And that's where the majority of the time, the funding, the coordination and the strategies, the policies and the regulations are all at the 30,000 foot level. Now, I do have a spoiler alert, and I know my colleague, Professor Jordan, is going to take us down to ground level. He's going to talk about some things from Nigeria. In the meantime, I don't want to give you too much of a spoiler alert for his tomorrow. So I'm going to move into the strategies. So in conducting an assessment, if you've ever served, you understand in conducting a pre-movement, a pre-assessment, is identifying all the risks, analyzing those risks, and evaluating those risks, rating those risks. An assessment is a process that is made up of 3 separate processes: risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. I personally use a software program in any of my activities and events that I do. It's called iAudit. And it does, as a leader, I need to be able to assign that responsibility for each person, each department, to be able to identify those risks and come up with a contingency plan for not only analyzing, also evaluating to see whether it's something we should do. And I'll show you, I guess, in another slide. Last year, there was a very big, large event in Malta one of the cryptocurrency crown jewel events. And a company that I specifically told not to invest $10 million did, and they lost that money. And had they followed the analysis that we gave them, that would have never happened. I feel bad, but with high risk, there's high reward. With low risk, low reward. And if you take that chance, well, that's what happens. Risk identification is the process that is used to find, recognize, and describe the risks that could affect the achievement of the objectives. Risk analysis is a process that is used to understand the nature and sources and causes of the risks that you identify and to estimate that level of risk. A risk-based assessment is a necessity for all new startups, right? In your strategy to form your business, you want to be able to mitigate all the risk that you can. That doesn't have liability to creep in and just kill your business right from the start. So evaluating those risks is the process used to compare the risk criteria in order to determine whether or not a specified level of risk is acceptable or tolerable, because some risks are not tolerable. One such risk in a new organization is sexual harassment. It's not tolerable. And so you have to be able to mitigate those risks right off the bat from those incidents from happening. From a 30,000 foot level, most large corporations use the Basel AML index for ranking a country and their risks around the world. And these risk scores are based on data that's collected from the Financial Action Task Force and Transparency International, data from the World Bank and the World Economic Forum. And what they do is cover 16 indicators in 5 domains relevant to assessing money laundering and the terrorism financing risk at the country level. And these risk levels rank country based on their overall scores. And it's not necessarily to rank the countries superficially in comparison. However, it does provide an overall pictures of the different countries and regions' risk level. Again, we said we're at the 30,000 foot level. Those 5 domains that used in the terrorism financing risk level are the quality of the country or the organization's AML-CTF framework, bribery and corruption index, the financial transparency and standards, the public transparency and accountability, or legal and political risks. And there's always going to be a political risk in all of this. It just depends on which side you're on. So these weaknesses, they do cover corruption and issues with political and civil rights, media freedoms, and independence of the judiciary. 3/4 of the countries are listed by the US today as major money laundering destinations. And these regions face high risks of human trafficking, with the highest level exposure level is Russia. And when I looked into digging deeper into the studies that was just done February this last year, there's different regions that the Foreign Action Task Force use, and they're.
Does it look? It's super nice. Excellent. So here, I guess this looks like new floors, I guess. Yes. Yes. Everything is, all the floors are new. The front floor.
Nicholas,
Sorry,
can you please mute your mic?
I didn't mean to interrupt him. So these countries, based on the ranking again of their overall score in the region versus the global average, is what they really look at. And I've went through most of the, I guess, the Basel governance reports that are coming out. Investing in companies, and you'll see if you look at the very bottom, Malta happened to be one of the countries listed as the lowest in ranking, or the highest of corruption within that area, the overall risk as far as and what happened last year. I said there was the largest cryptocurrency conference held, and on a massive scale, millions were lost. Not because they were bad risks, but because the risks that we identified were not mitigated correctly. But then that also shows Belgium, Cyprus, Netherlands, Spain, and UK listed as major money laundering destinations. And because of that, it's been listed that The UK is just a whole lot more secretive, and they don't have the financial transparency that most countries have. And I'll go through that. Next, I wanted to look at the flow in Latin America and the Caribbean. They were also, they had some very weak areas, and we know through drug interdiction forces. I worked counter-drug for a number of years in a few countries. The flow of fentanyl comes in from South America, and it's muled and distributed throughout the United States. Same with the drug cartels. They won't tell you that, but I have it on very good authority that people cross the border of Mexico into the U.S. with marijuana and a few other drugs. So with that, most of the entrants, Chile is very high of an overall risk. And I know that their policies in place for money laundering are higher and greater, and adherence is better in Chile than it is in Belize or Barbados or Turks and Caicos or Aruba and Mexico. And so with that, almost 90% of the countries that are listed, with the exception of Turks and Caicos, Grenada, Chile, and Uruguay, are money laundering destinations. And these sources on my slide, I've left there so that you can see where this information is coming from. So with that, last year, the US released its new strategy, CTTV, Countering Terrorism and Targeted Violence. And one of the things they hid within the congressional appropriation, everyone that received the $600, there was also a line item. And when you start reading congressional appropriations, you learn to be able to look between and read between the lines, because until you see the funding portion of a congressional appropriation, you don't know really where the money is going. And so following the money, you must be able to see from the start, the cradle to grave, of where its inception started, who started it, which party started it, and that's key to following the money. Otherwise, the other part of that is called the color of money, and I'll go into that a little bit later as well. So the U.S. Department of the Treasury, their strategy for combating terrorists and other illicit financing described in great detail this money laundering and financing of terrorism regime. The strategy identified financial service organizations that are key in identifying the areas to exercise increased due diligence and expect heightened scrutiny from regulators. So one of those requirements was the ultimate beneficial organization listing. And as going through Texas, they're going to be able to see. The problem I have with it is when you read the appropriation detail, if you are 10% less of a stakeholder in any organization, you don't need to be known. And there's a problem. And so as time goes on, like we addressed in the beginning of the US Patriot Act, various regulations and restrictions and cross-border stuff. Now we're getting into from the 30,000 foot level in these new policies to looking at heightened scrutiny from regulators. That just gives the regulators more power. Among the vulnerabilities they discussed were the customer due diligence we talked about, which identifying the owners of these accounts, all it takes is a country not participating. Most countries do not want their data outside. A prime example, Indonesia and the Bank of Indonesia does not want their data outside the US. So how is it being managed? Well, they are now using a social scale through the cell phone using AI technology to manage their credit. And that's how they're going to verify someone's past histories, is using AI through their cell phones. Countries do not want their data outside. Russia is not going to allow their data to go outside. So it's dependent upon one person. And that's usually the compliance officer in the organization or the supervisor. And what's the last thing that a supervisor is supposed to do? He's supposed to supervise and refine all the processes and all the people that are under him. And so with that, this guidance that was released for developing countries with large levels of informality and porous borders, close to a conflict zone, and that itself has suffered terrorist attacks, may need to take a completely different approach compared to a developed country with a sophisticated financial sector. Obviously, the US financial sector is completely different than Somalia. There's a different approach that's going to have to be taken in Somalia. So due to these challenges, these task force risks is often given limited attention in these national risk assessments. Countries like Jamaica, they applied through the World Bank to get a loan to develop their policing constabulary force. They did that because Jamaica has the highest murder rate in the world right now. And so it made sense for them to borrow money. What do you think their credit looks like on the world stage if we were to look? It's a big risk. And so they also have an assessment they have to use for lending countries monies. That's why countries do not borrow money, and they seek out other countries, specifically ones that are adverse to countering America's adversaries, right? If you're familiar with CAATSA is a formal agreement between two countries for countering America's adversaries. And it's kind of hard to make a country sign CAATSA if they've just finished prototype development of the S-400 with Russia. It's not something that needs, they don't talk about. And it's not that I'm picking on India. It just happens to be that's what happened. The same with Iraq buying tanks, from Russia. It shouldn't happen, but it does. And so the lack of expertise and personnel on the ground and limited information or unregulated or unsupervised activities, they pose further challenges for lower capacity countries. And that's all this is about. It's these larger capacity countries overseeing the risks in the smaller capacity countries, helping to educate the new supervisors. Even the new kids need this education. These methodologies for assessing risk, jurisdictional, sometimes fail to take into account the unique threats posed by terrorist financiers because they're sympathizers with the opposition. It happens all the time. And I know Professor Jordan's going to talk about mercantilism. That was a spoiler alert in his presentation after mine. So some of the commonalities, terrorism financing risk can be seen as a function of three factors: threat, vulnerability, and consequence. We looked at AML in the beginning, placement and layering. This involves the risk that funds or assets intended for a terrorist or terrorist organization are being raised, moved, stored, or used, or through a jurisdiction in the form of legitimate and illegitimate funds or assets. It happens. That threat is a person or group or people with the potential to cause harm, raising, moving, or storing, using funds or other assets, whether legitimate or illegitimate, for terrorist purposes. These threats may occur and include domestic and international terrorist organizations. They happen all the time. I did remove a slide. I didn't want to talk about Susan Rosenberg and Black Lives Matter, but it's a perfect example of how things get mixed up with legitimate versus illegitimate operations. The concept of terrorist financing vulnerability comprises those things that can be exploited by the threat or that may support or facilitate its activities. The vulnerabilities may include features of a particular scope, a financial product, cryptocurrency, a type of service, antiquities trading, that makes them attractive for terrorism financing. Large informal economies and porous borders. I would say the occupation or Pakistan occupied Kashmir is a prime example with Pakistan and India that makes it attractive for cross-border stuff that's happening in these informal economies. And I know that hopefully the peace agreement that happened a couple of days ago continues in that area. Terrorism finding context and consequences refers to the impact or harm that a threat may cause if eventuated. This includes the effect of an underlying terrorist activity on domestic or institutional financial systems. We saw that with 9/11. That was the biggest attempt at taking down our financial economy, but it didn't work. The consequences are likely to be more severe. Money laundering, I know that one of the consequences that did hurt our economy, that I'm going to go to real quick, was in 2008, the mortgage lending crisis. That was probably one of the biggest events next to the Depression that hurt our economy, because mortgage lending units, well, I mean, just like anything else, you saw the innovation with cryptocurrency and everybody's jumping on board with an IPO. I got to do crowdfunding. I need to get my product out. And next thing you know, you see them being arrested by DOJ for fraud and embezzlement. And so the mortgage lending crisis of 2008 and Wall Street's storied investment firms began failing. The bank management struggled to understand in a timely fashion where all the risks lie. And that's all it took, was not understanding or doing a risk-based assessment prior to that happening, and not having that complete framework and analysis in place prior to that event happening. So what's happening is we're reactionary. Almost inevitably, when something happens in the US around the world, the first thing is if it's a human rights violation, it's the first thing that we talk about, and the UN talks about another resolution. Although, you know, I guess it depends on the country and what this happens. The obligation to identify, assess, and understand the terrorist financing risks we face, and how do we do that? Well, by designating an authority or mechanism to coordinate actions. On the basis of this assessment, jurisdictions, and I said earlier, it should be somewhat different in each jurisdiction because terrorism is different in each region. It should apply this risk-based approach. I've outlined many times these risk-based assessments to ensure that the measures to prevent or mitigate these risks are commensurate with the risks identified. And that's usually what happens. We can identify all the risks. So in the last, everybody's familiar, I hope, with the gray list, and there is a black list. There are currently right now 32 countries that have zero effectiveness in their AML programs, in their supervision programs. This report doesn't by color the ones that are actually gray share those risks. Those 32 countries are listed. Some of them have yet to go through their fourth round and should have done so this past February. I think COVID pushed off some of that for them to be able to go through their assessment. So those 5 domains we talked about earlier, the weights and the scores, this is basically how it works. And the effectiveness of an AML supervision across these countries, currently in that 5 domains, 65% of the assessment goes into the quality of the AML frameworks. 10% goes into bribery and corruption. And that, again, sometimes is based on legal and political risks at the very bottom there. Public transparency and accountability, and the financial transparency and standards. And if I looked at this small graph, 10 countries currently are at about a 66% in effectiveness of their programs. 58 countries are at a 33% level. And 32 countries, like I said, are at zero effectiveness. And so it's an ongoing struggle. And as these countries, I would say I have 2 right now, that India and Indonesia are working through their industry 4.0, and they're coming online in the world as the #1 for cell phone usage is both of those countries. And so they're apt more to practice unethical practices and their use of programs. I don't know how many calls a day I get from someone telling me I need to go to my computer and do this, this, and this. And I'm like, who are you? Or from Amazon and my account's corrupted. It happens all the time. So we're looking into an effective assessment for dealing with the specifics of our stakeholders specifically. We have stakeholders in our organization. There are multi-use work groups around now. NATO just finished their working group in the last 5 years on their new program that they have out. Public-private collaboration is the key to assess these terrorist financing risks. And I'll just harp on it. Collaboration and commitment is the key. In any strategy I've seen that has come out since last year, it's about collaboration. All the funding, even the USAID program is looking at co-design, creation, and collaboration for their programs. And it needs to happen because of development of typologies on financial indicators associated to homegrown and lone wolf terrorists. There's new methods like Ellen yesterday was talking about Rappaport's 5 waves, and that's how you look at it. They're developing these new typologies based on indicators common to individuals convicted of these past offenses, and to develop a better understanding of terrorist financing, these risks affecting corporate investment banks that can be used to inform for customer due diligence and risk-based assessments. Within the stages used in money laundering, terrorist financing is a term used to describe those activities that provide financial support to terrorism. Well, the stages of money laundering are one thing, AML, it's placement, layer, and integration, like we talked about. However, as we establish the funds that can be from both legal and illegal sources, the methods used in money laundering cannot be applied directly to terrorist financing. AML, CTF, therefore, these methods used to finance terrorism should be classified in 3 ways: organizing funds to terrorist purposes, moving funds raised to terrorist headquarters, and moving funds from terrorist headquarters to terrorist individuals. And these methods of classification, in one way, obviously organizing fundraising for terrorist purposes. We talked about charitable fronts. NGOs are suspected for being fronts now, and the UBO list will be helpful in identifying those. In my state, every single nonprofit is required by the Attorney General to register and have a license. Well, that doesn't happen throughout the world. And there's some statistics that I'll share here in a minute. The traditional banking channels, well, as time goes by, we're seeing how this stuff is working through Western Union, through PayPal, through cryptocurrency. The past decade has clearly demonstrated that the international financial community remains a key point of financial vulnerability, because some banks are not actively trying to prevent illicit conduct at all. They can't afford the software programs involved in running these programs. And so it's incumbent. How many federal credit unions do you know that are running software? Not many. In the US, yes, but around the world, no. Moving terrorist funds from headquarters to terrorist individuals, identifying and exploiting the terrorist vulnerabilities in this respect requires a deep understanding of the different means and mechanisms that such groups employ to maintain a steady cash flow, because that's what it's about for terrorist organizations, a steady cash flow so that they can continue. I won't go through Hamas and Hezbollah. I think that was done yesterday in order to be able to cut down on my tank. And so I have a question for the audience. What do these 5 banks have in common? Anybody want to take a guess? Lloyd's, Credit Suisse, Bank of Tokyo, Standard Chartered, and the ING Bank. So they were all fined for violating sanctions. They were basically helping Iran and Iranian bankers in a way from stripping information from funds transfers. Now, Iran was designated in '84 as a sanctioned country, specifically through its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And so the funding from those banks helped to continue that. We all know it happens. It's indicative of what terrorists do. They hire and they figure out and they exploit, and they want to be able to, hey, you need to help us with our cause. This is all our cause. Please help us. So within that, the compliance, and without the compliance of private actors, a government sanctions are merely hortatory. It's just hollow words. It follows that the economic success of a sanction episode depends on 2 factors. One is the magnitude and importance of the commercial activity available to be withdrawn, and the degree to which the individuals and entities comply with the sanctions. And it's no wonder then the United States, with its massive domestic market, its global financial networks, and aggressive law enforcement, has achieved the greatest power potential in this regard. The US government can reach out and touch many people in any way it wants to. And so if other countries had the ability to do that, what do you think would happen? The US should not be, in one aspect, the world's police officers. However, it happens. It happens more than people realize. Threatening to deny access to its markets through secondary sanctions. Well, we have sanctions against North Korea, but that doesn't mean that India is not going to, out of charitable grace, give North Korea access to soybeans because it needs to feed its people. It's going to happen. Sanctions are going to be violated. Rules were meant to be broken. Threatening to deny access to its markets only hurts its people. And so there has to be other ways of dealing with this. And so I found this chart from Refinitiv that lists from 2010 to 2019, the fines for the banks that breach the OFAC sanctions. And it's happened more than most people want to admit. And I think the largest was in 2012. There's the ING, there's Standard Chartered, $667 million. But the problem, like Western Union, that was fined for money laundering, the victims were not helped in that way. There are charitable organizations that are legal and are legitimate, and those funds were used in different ways. USAID has been on occasion in the middle, the food programs in the middle between terrorist organizations and the countries they're helping to feed from famine. I've seen it personally happen to where you've had to, as a member of USAID, work with the terrorist organizations in order to complete your mission. It happens all the time. And congressional oversight records show that that happens. And I thought that this picture was worth 1,000 words up to this last year, 2019, where Standard Chartered Bank again was fined $657 million for violating OFAC sanctions with Iran. Regional level and sub-regional level cooperation is needed. Compliance at the local level within small states, border management, countering violent extremism, they're all parts of terrorism financing and stopping it and countering it. Foreign terrorist fighters, human rights, information and communications technologies. These are all cooperation is needed in all these areas. And I think it was Vineet that talked about, I've spoken more on Hawala. I don't need to go through the parts of that as he did. It's been around since the 8th century. In Chinese, they call it Feiqian. You gotta make sure you do this, Feiqian. Po Quan in Malaysia, and the black market peso in South America. It all happens. I think one of the largest fines that came out of South America was from the Mexican banking. They're the ones a while back that starting the check cashing places in the South. The problem with that is a large majority of migrants that come into the US can't get bank accounts for some reason. And so they have to use these check cashing places when they're working. However, that hurts our GDP because those funds are sent back to the country because most Mexican nationals want to send money back to their family. And so it happens all the time. That's one of the biggest risk assessments the government figured out from the check cashing industries and giving them credit for that. Al-Qaeda, largely a clandestine network, uses Hawala. And from their mosque, sympathetic clerics and charitable organizations, we've talked about that. In Somalia, they call it Zawilad, a system of value transfer that has facilitated long-distance trade in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, Mesopotamia, and Iran since the beginning of time on the Silk Road. And that was interesting when I did some research, that knowing that the Organization for Economic Cooperation actually had member nations licensed as legal Hawala traders. And there's the dates that these countries were legally doing this same value transfer system. And now I think as of 1986 is when the first DigiCash was started by I think it was a Hollywood entertainer, I can't remember his name, but he started the first DigiCash. It was a little plastic coin that he wanted, but it didn't work. and it was shut down. Member nations now are refining their monetary systems to align with UBO, KYC, and the AML rules. Even if there is a computer in every house in the world with internet, what do you think these IVTSs will still be used? Absolutely. And why are they used? The number one reason is tax evasion. People do not want to pay taxes. That's the number one reason this happens. Cryptocurrency and the decentralization created by Craig Wright years ago was based on decentralizing. And if you've read the Cypherpunk Manifesto, you'll understand that a cashless, rules-based society is what people do not want. They don't want regulation. They want a free society that does not take money for fees or taxes. And at one such instance, it was in India when they discovered 150 bags of cash and jewels in Mumbai. Part of that money was used to finance the Mumbai terrorist attack, and they figured that out later in their investigation. And with looking and going through the UN, it was, I guess, last year when the UN ambassador from Nigeria to the United Nations gave a speech in where he said the basic methods of money laundering from Nigeria, and not that I'm picking on Nigeria, but there's a lot going on in Nigeria in the news right now. The cash removal from the countries with couriers and money concealment in the cargo for further repatriation through foreign banks and trade-based money laundering is what's happening right now. Trade-based money laundering, they're going through the key indicators on that, and a lot more will be coming out with the trainings that OFAC and Foreign Action Task Force and some of the other, I think, countries are developing their own trainings. We've developed one for Qatar. We've yet to do it, but hopefully we'll do it here soon. The passage of cash accounts significantly exceeding the client's actual capabilities. Well, if you look and see what Joe Schmo's last tax statement over the last 3 or 4 years, and he only has 37,000 as income, and all of a sudden he has 200,000, that's probably an indicator something's going on. That's some of the red flags that these new AI software programs are going to detect. Transactions on a particularly large scale in the interest of third parties, huge amounts of exchanging of money from third parties, contracts making with foreign companies for various information and reference services, personal information with knowingly distorted data. Well, stripping the data from the Bank of Iran and those companies in the UK helping, well, that's a key indicator. Fictitious lease contracts, we've seen that. Port leases are a good one. We have some friends that work in the maritime industry that they've seen more and more ports. It was almost, I think last year when San Francisco, we almost lost the lease of a San Francisco port to China. Had DOJ not stepped in to realize what was going on. That's happened, I think, with 8 countries on the Belt and Road Initiative. That, you know, these leases in the ports and these arrangements with money loans have happened, and these countries just can't pay back the loans. And so their ports are overtaken. And we're trying to fend that off in Afghanistan with one of the, not Afghanistan, in Pakistan with one of the ports. Fictitious lease contracts, we talked about that. Concealment of true money origins and cash transfers to frontman accounts with a breakdown of amounts. He also stated in Nigeria, a large number of NPOs operate across the country. The legal regime in Nigeria allows both local and international NPOs to operate. And the people use NPOs as a platform to help the poor and fight injustices and to ensure effective and equitable distribution of resources. I just recently gave money to a veteran suicide organization. It was probably, it was a good thing to do, but did I check the background? I have been checking their background, and yes, they are legit. Most people don't do it. They go based on emotion on giving their money to charities these days. Some trust these NPOs more than some institutions of government. And that's some of the larger corporations that are out there, Wounded Warrior Foundation. I think many people trust in giving them for the children's research initiatives that are out. They trust that and give more to that than they do their own government and taxes. There's no detailed continuous monitoring process of the source and applications of funds by these NPOs in Nigeria. And without going into too much more, it's evident Nigeria as a country is conscious of these impacts of terrorism financing. And our colleague, Professor Olawumi, he will probably talk more about that. I do like the name of their special control unit on money laundering. It's called SCUML. That's pretty effective. They deliberate effort to ensure that all NPOs are operating within Nigeria are registered and effectively regulated. Intensify awareness within the domestic and less privileged people who are the most vulnerable people in the society and are ready to accept this charity. And some of the NPOs and NGOs cover front for terrorism. Right now, there's 1.2 million NPOs that operate in India. And I don't know, I think with their new policy recently, there is a requirement by the government to list all of these. We had a charity that we were helping. However, we've noticed Christian charities in India are frowned upon these days for some reason. And so we're looking into that. In Russia, an estimated 277,000 NPOs exist. In Nigeria, there's 500,000, otherwise known in Nigeria as NGOs. And across the globe, there's 40 million NPOs that are operating with varied areas of concern. And so the world has been greatly impacted with the activities and projects and initiatives embarked upon by different NPOs over the last few decades. And the key to this is a commitment. The new strategy of each member nation is the creation of this new UBO database on which financial institutions could rely and would ease the customer due diligence burden for these financial institutions. It's just more requirements the banks have to go to because they cannot trust people. And because we need to be able to monitor and figure out where this money is coming from and going to. We also need to figure out what color it is, because the color of money is important. When you do congressional appropriations, you may see that money leave and go from one fund from taxpayers' expense to another country, and then you do not know where it goes. You have audits, but not all countries are as ethically motivated by compliance as the United States is. And so in the end, it's up to supervisors, right? Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is looking. And that's all you have anymore in this world is integrity. The Treasury Department recognizes digital assets as including not only digital currencies, but also digital assets that are securities, commodities, and derivatives. This informal value transfer system manual versus cashless digital is all it is right now. It's still happening. Fijian happens every day coming out of LA. The largest poorest populations of Asians in the area, you're going to see these phone calls using Fijian, which is no more than Hawala, because that's the way they've done it for thousands of years. The same with the Middle East. So with that, I think I'm going to conclude. Is there any questions? I guess is the first thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are there any questions? That's a great presentation. Thank you. I think it's quite a lot to consolidate, and yeah. So
and that was just at the 30,000 foot level.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's so much work being done at the local level, but we never hear about it. All we hear about is the bad things. So to know that it's being done, the more these assessments are used at the local level, the better off things are going to be. It's not that hard, and it just takes a supervisor understanding these things.
And absolutely, I think also the COVID situation as well has created new financial risks with regards to the medical supply, fake medical supplies as well.
Yes.
And these are the challenges now that with jurisdictions to combat these scams, even the cyber crime as well. has been related to this COVID situation.
Yes.
And there are challenges ahead to combat the anti-money laundering. Yeah. There's no question so far. What suggest maybe we take a 10 minutes break before Jordan's presentation? I think it's quite a lot to consolidate.
I think there's 2 speakers before Jordan. One was
all right, okay.
Yeah, I think it's Amanda. Amanda has a slight presentation, and then we're gonna show the next video that we couldn't show yesterday. I had from a different source, from Mohammed Ahmed. I think everyone will like this video as well. It's on QAnon.
Yeah.
This series of the State Department. So in doing so, yeah, take a 10-minute break, I guess, like you said, and come back. And
I don't know our participants what they think, or we can continue. We can go along.
Let me stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, so maybe just 5 minutes and then we continue.
There you go. All righty, we'll be back shortly.
Yeah, we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Mohammed?
Jordan, how are you?
I'm okay.
Your internet is much better?
A little much better. Are we on break now?
Yeah, we're taking a quick break. I'm going to set up, I think Amanda is up next.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Amanda.
Hi, and just let you, can you hear me? Because I've been having all kinds of computer problems today. So am I coming through clear?
You're clear. I can hear you.
Okay, I'm not going to share my video screen because I want to make sure I don't eat up bandwidth. So I'm just going to put the presentation deck up and then read it, like just go through it. So it's okay. I'm trying to mitigate the risk of having problems. It's been a day.
You'll sound like a natural instead of reading from a slide. Well, that's all this is.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about crypto a little bit too.
Good. I have a series. I did a 25-page paper SWOT analysis on crypto. In going back through who invented it, I still
it's really fascinating because I'm not going to go into it too deep in the weeds today, but there is a lot of legislation pending right now. I don't know if you've been following the docket, but there's at least 15 different bills that have been presented related to crypto, and I'm glad they're getting on board with it and they're catching up because it's an emerging threat for sure.
Sure. I understand the innovation behind blockchain, and cryptography is all it is. If you're familiar with SharePoint, being able to do mortgage documents with a timestamp hash mark, and that's all it is, using 256-bit encryption. Using that encryption, that digital signature is very helpful when it comes to fraud. Mortgage fraud, title stealing is becoming a #1 thing these days. And so the cryptography behind blockchain within this system, if someone owned the internet, it would be okay, but nobody owns the internet. That's the problem. It's the ISPs that are making all the money, and these guys are in the background mining with this fictitious person who supposedly created this whole thing. Is just hilarious. And when I read the Cypherpunk manifesto, now I understood it completely, why they want decentralization. I get it. It's one side versus them. I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to pay fees. I don't want to pay regulations. But I see the need for the innovation behind cryptography and blockchain. It is important. Timestamp hashing is important because the threats from cyber, if you're not using that TLS 3.0, you're using the 1.0 and 1.2, that's where all the hacking is occurring. And the 3.0 we all know is government use, and most of the time you can't get in that system. So, but
Right.
figuring it out. So anyway, hope my presentation was helpful.
It was great.
I was kind of bummed that Una Vandenberg from Raw Compliances, she's been sick the last few days, and I guess, it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Hong Kong right now, so she's not able to present unless she's here. Let me look. Nope, I don't see her. But that's okay. When everyone's back from break, we'll reconvene.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Todd,
Yes, sir.
when am I likely to present?
Right after Amanda in the video, you'll be the culmination of our event. You get to take us home, sir.
I didn't hear you at all.
Is who here yet? The other speakers?
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, let me send you a text.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we can continue. Okay, so our next speaker is Amanda Henninger. Amanda.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am going to actually switch over to not having a video because I've been having Wi-Fi issues. So just give me 1 second.
No problem.
Can you see my screen yet or no?
Not yet.
All right. How about now?
Yes, it's coming up. Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. And you can see the presentation? Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we can see.
All righty. So hello, everybody. My name is Amanda Henninger, and I'm the Director of International Security and Counterterrorism, as well as the Chair of the Counterterrorism Task Force and the Chair of the Fulbright Committee at BIED Society. Thank you for inviting me to join you all today. I'm honored to join the Global Counter-Terrorism Institute to talk about the work of my organization, as well as some of the research I'm doing right now on countering terrorism finance. So my focus today is going to be on ongoing, future, and continual threats to government and financial institutions posed by financing terrorism. Basically, I'm going to talk about anti-money laundering and combating the finance of terrorism briefly, as it's already been covered today. and I'm going to provide a few case studies on the emerging threat of cryptocurrency, which is serving as a growing nexus of transnational financial crime and terrorism finance. So before I start, I just wanted to give everyone a brief introduction to what we're doing at BIED, and then invite all of you to reach out if you're interested in pursuing any of our opportunities as a fellow, an intern, or a partner. So the BIED Society is currently based in Washington, D.C., but we have international focus. Our mission is to bring together key professions that impact national security and international policy. What we try to do is represent the synergy between research and policy by mentoring, training, conducting research, engaging in policy formulation, and also doing partnership development. We truly believe in putting policy into practice, and we're currently developing several partnership ventures related to policy development, public awareness initiatives, and training and technical assistance programs. Our interns, fellows, assistant directors, and directors represent an expansive array of international and domestic experience in the public, private, and defense industry sectors. So we have three primary strategic initiatives, which are professional development, thought leadership, and project and program development. Basically, we believe in the power of networking and leveraging our knowledge of older generations and mentoring younger generations to further international affairs professionals and work in the community. We also like to engage in thought leadership by providing analysis, research, policy development, and publications on trends in international affairs, international security, and public policy. Finally, we are engaging in different projects and programs through collaborative partnerships with the goal to implement dynamic and creative solutions for complex policy issues. Our research covers a wide range of topics within the field of IR and international security. My focus in my department is counterterrorism and international security. And we're specifically focusing on radicalization, violent extremism, and counterterrorism from national and international security perspectives. As I mentioned before, if you're interested in joining with us or working with us, I have our website posted here and our International Affairs Academy document of the day, my email, and then the chairman, who is Ken Davis, also listed on here as well. So having said all that, we've already talked about money laundering, counterterrorism finance today, so I'm only going to go over this briefly. Money laundering is the process of making proceeds of criminal activity that have been legally obtained. So according to the IMF and World Bank, criminals launder an estimated $2 to nearly $4 trillion each year. Among those who seek to disguise illegal proceeds of their crimes are narco traffickers, terrorist organizations, corrupt public officials, and transnational organized criminal organizations. They introduce illegally obtained funds into the stream of legitimate commerce and finance, which allows criminals to profit from their legal activity. It undermines the international financial system and erodes public trust in the integrity of financial systems and institutions. Some criminals are using the financial system to support terrorists or acts of terrorism. Terrorist financiers and other criminals are using the formal financial system as well as non-traditionals, which are reflective in new payment methods such as Bitcoin and Ripple. Additionally, as we've discussed in this presentation today, there are methods of value transfer such as Hawala, trade-based money laundering, and cash carriers, especially within countries that have non-existent or weak national anti-money laundering or countering the finance of terrorism programs. There are several tools that are used for AML and CFT to prevent, counter, and eliminate illicit financial transactions. Some of these include economic sanctions, 311 actions, asset forfeiture, and anti-money laundering initiatives. These tools are used to expose the infrastructure of criminal organizations, different webs of corruption, and also conspiracies that are enacted to commit terrorist acts. It provides authorities with roadmaps to those who facilitate criminal and illicit activities. It leads authorities to recover and leads to the recovery of forfeiture of unlawfully acquired assets, and also supports broad and effective deterrence efforts at the national and international level against a wide range of criminal activities, which includes financing terrorism. So moving forward in the current climate, there's an emerging threat that needs to be addressed related to how we're preventing, mitigating, and eliminating illicit financial activities that are difficult to trace and are often cloaked in anonymity. As we move forward, we have to identify new countermeasures to mitigate threats from non-traditional financial systems, which is leading us to a discussion of cryptocurrency. So when we hear the term cryptocurrency, a lot of people have a basic understanding of what it is, but aren't really clear on what it specifically is speaking to. So cryptocurrency at a general level is a volatile and non-traditional financial market that is decentralized and largely cloaked in mystery. Currently in the news, we're seeing a surge in popularity with the Bitcoin mania on the legal side of investment due to the significant booms and busts we've seen in the investment community. Crypto is a legitimate form of investment that has a shadow side. The flip side to this coin is its role in shadow banking and illicit finance. There's a lack of regulation as it is a non-traditional, decentralized, and digitally based banking system that operates outside of the strict boundaries of traditional banking system norms. Crypto is a digital currency, just to explain what it is at a base level. It's a digital currency that can be used to buy goods and services, but uses an online ledger with strong cryptography to secure online transactions. So although it is traceable, it makes it very difficult to trace as it's a digital asset, again, as it's decentralized and it's anonymous. But evolving law enforcement measures are in development to address these gaps in monitoring and asset tracing. So transitional criminal organizations, international terrorist organizations, and even extremist groups linked to U.S. domestic terrorism are utilizing crypto to fundraise, finance terrorist activities, and launder money. As the Treasury Department, Justice Department, and policymakers on the Hill move forward on discussions and policy implementation related to terrorist finance and money laundering, key questions that must be asked are, what threats does crypto pose to national and international security? How is it contributing to criminal and terrorist activities within this decentralized market? And how are we going to adapt traditional countermeasures, policies, and protocols to safeguard our financial systems and our security? Recent initiatives undertaken by our law enforcement here in the United States indicate innovative shifts that they have engaged in to address these ever-changing threats illustrated through cryptocurrency. And that's highlighted in recent success of the Justice Department at dismantling terrorist financing campaigns. So I'm just going to talk about a few different case studies of different initiatives that the Justice Department has undertaken within the past year and a half to dismantle terrorist financing through cyber-enabled campaigns. In August of 2020, the FBI announced that it dismantled three major terrorist financing campaigns, which involved Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. As a result, U.S. authorities were able to seize millions of dollars, over 300 cryptocurrency accounts, 4 websites, and 4 Facebook pages, all related to the criminal enterprises. This initiative represents the government's largest ever seizure of cryptocurrency in the terrorism context. These terror finance campaigns all relied on sophisticated cyber tools, including the solicitation of cryptocurrency donations from around the world. So I'm going to talk about a few examples of how this was done and what the FBI did in response. So the first is the Al-Qassam Brigade, which is engaged in online cryptocurrency fundraising efforts. Starting in 2019, the Al-Qassam Brigades posted a call on its social media page for Bitcoin donations to fund its campaign of terror. They then moved this request to its official website, alqassam.net, alqassam.ps, and qassam.ps. So the images you're looking at were taken from their social media campaign directly. The Al-Qassam Brigades claimed that Bitcoin donations were untraceable and would be used for violent causes. The websites provided instructions on how to anonymously make donations, in part by using unique Bitcoin addresses generated for each individual donor. However, these donations were not anonymous, as we see with the outcome with the FBI's intervention. The IRS, HSI, and FBI were able to collaboratively track and seize all 150 cryptocurrency accounts that laundered funds to and from the Al-Qassam Brigade's accounts. Simultaneously, law enforcement entities executed criminal search warrants relating to the United States-based subjects who donate to the terrorist campaigns. Law enforcement was also able to seize the infrastructure of the Al-Qassam Brigade websites and subsequently covertly operated alqassam.net. During this operation, they were able to receive funds from persons seeking to provide material support to the terrorist organization. However, they were instead donated to fund Bitcoin wallets controlled by the United States. Another recent example of how the FBI has engaged in counterintelligence and cyber-related initiatives related to countering cryptocurrency is the scheme by Al-Qaeda and affiliated terrorist groups that are largely based out of Syria. This loose conglomerate of terrorist organizations operated a Bitcoin money laundering network using Telegram channels and other social media platforms to solicit cryptocurrency donations to further their goals. In some instances, they even acted as charities when in fact they were openly and explicitly soliciting funds for violent terrorist attacks. Undercover agents communicated with the administrator of Reminder for Syria, which was one of the charities that was seeking to finance terrorism via these Bitcoin donations. The administrator stated that he hoped for the destruction of the United States, discussed the price for funding surface-to-air missiles, and warned about possible criminal consequences. Cryptocurrency and terrorism finance have recently become a focus of domestic terrorism policy and initiatives, as evident in the work undertaken by the FBI that I've just discussed, and current investigations of its link to the attack on the Capitol. So we're all familiar with the attack that occurred on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. As investigations into the event are progressing, a growing concern amongst policymakers is the potential role of cryptocurrency in funding domestic terrorism, specifically within the context of crowdsourced extremism. Initial investigations have indicated a flow of cryptocurrency to far-right extremists, both domestic and international, involved in the US Capitol attack. An example, a report by blockchain analysis firm Chain Analysis showed on December 8, 2020, a donor sent 28.15 BTC, worth approximately $522,000 at the time of transfer, to 22 separate addresses in a single transaction. The report went on to note that many of these addresses belong to far-right activists and internet personalities, one of which included Nick Fuentes. According to Chain Analysis, the amount of Bitcoin received by Fuentes was over $250,000. While the role of Bitcoin in funding this event is still under investigation, the memo related to Dollars Against Democracy, which was a hearing that was held on this past Thursday, states that nonetheless, since it is increasingly common to find cryptocurrency wallet addresses listed on extremist websites, this is a potential and growing source of funds for domestic extremists. Currently, there are concerns related to other potential illicit finance avenues such as crowdfunding, charities, and social media platforms, which is reflected in several pending legislative bills related to anti-money laundering and countering terrorism finance from the cryptocurrency perspective. This chart just kind of gives an example of how we've seen a growing trend in money donated to domestic extremism via cryptocurrency. This shows a trend over the last 4 years. And as a result, this is indicative of a growing crowdsourced and crowd-funded share of investing in domestic terrorism events, and also a need to have further legislation related to blockchain regulation, countering illicit activities, and also with cryptocurrency, specifically in the case of human trafficking, terrorism, hacking, and money laundering. Moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see how we are going to handle this domestically and internationally, especially as these cryptocurrency mechanisms are constantly evolving and changing, and in response to a dynamic terrorism finance environment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amanda. Any questions? If you can just stop sharing, Amanda, because I'm appearing on the screen. Thank you. Thank you very much, and that's very insightful. Any questions? No. I think, Todd, you had another video to show before Jordan.
Yeah, it looks like Mohammed Ahmed didn't make it today, but that's okay. He sent me the link to the second video. I'm going to go ahead and try to start that. We had a problem with one yesterday.
To the followers of QAnon, I have a good one for you. In my backyard in Minnesota lives Bigfoot. Yep. You believed folks eat children, run pedophile rings from a pizza joint. Mass shootings are false flag operations. Mass killings of Democrats, Republicans as deep state post-election. Yep. You'll believe this one. Bigfoot lives in my backyard. Bigfoot likes to barbecue and read newspapers, enjoys a good cigar. He is funny, funny, loves my kids and helps my wife in chores. But this is a secret. He is the photo, Facebook and Twitter posting about it. He wrote an article too, anonymously. Like QAnon, I have proof. We are really worried about you. All. We love you as fellow Americans. Are you worried about transitioning? We can help. As Hafiz Muhammad Organization and Parents for Peace, call 1-844-49 peace. 1-844-49 peace. Come see Bigfoot. Come to my backyard. Take a selfie. If you believe QAnon, you're perfect to believe in this too.
So that was the second one we missed yesterday while he was here. He's not here today, so I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now,
anytime, instantly.
Uh-oh.
okay, thank you. So now we
To know about this.
we're going to bring our next speaker, Dr. Kunle Olawumi. Is the department head of criminology and security studies at Chrisland University, Nigeria, and is a professor of intelligence and global security study. He has retired a Navy Commodore in 2017. He was a one-time defense advisor to France, 2014, member of the Harvard Senior Executive Course, National International Security Studies. He holds a PhD in International Relations, Diplomacy from CEDS in France, a Master of Science degree in Strategic Studies from the University of Ibadan, and Bachelor of Science Economics major from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He is an alumni of Galileo International Management Institute in Israel, the United States Naval War College, and National Defense University, Washington, D.C. He has published many articles. He has published his academic book on Nigeria, Global Peace and International Protection on Human Rights, which was published in Germany and translated into 8 other international languages. In 2008, he was instrumental in bringing the Niger Delta militancy to a peaceful resolution. Today, he will speak about the assessment of the strengths and weaknesses and blocking the channels between various financial techniques. May I present you Professor Jordan? Welcome, Professor Jordan.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for a wonderful introduction. I think to speak at this point, after the CEO has spoken, it's going to be a very difficult thing because he has covered everything I think I wanted to talk about. But I think the difference today will be the fact that I'm actually talking from, not from the 30,000 feet, but I'm speaking from the ground zero itself. I'm speaking from Nigeria. And I think Nigeria has been in the news lately for not looking at the phenomenon of small arms as the enabler in the first instance. Why are we talking about terrorism, financing, chasing them from bank to bank? Why people are producing AK-47 in millions and making sure they get to the hands of nihilists? So we must begin to look at this concretely. I was very dispassionate about it, except we don't want to put an end to this scourge, and we want to just continue to pay lip service to it. We, in the fourth level, I'm going to discuss the issues. What are the issues? Why are we all here discussing terrorism? Then I'm going to have a small table of exercise for our students following this program. And I'm going to also distinguish, I'll make attempts, even though Todd has done so much job on that. That's money laundering and terrorism financing. I may not really deliberate too much on that after listening to Todd. Then the next question I'm going to ask is terrorism actually non-state actors? Or is it state-centric? We're going to discuss that as well and see. There will be no right answer, I can assure you. We're going to look at it dispassionately together and see whether terrorism is actually a non-state activity. I mean, non-state actors activity, or whether it's state-centric. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is how do we stop the proliferation of small arms? And I'm going to conclude by looking at Jordan's continuum. This is a theory that is designed specifically for third world countries where the scourge of terrorism is killing us in thousands. Next slide, please. Now, I said that terrorism has arguably been one of the defining factors of our age. And that's why the Global Counter-Terrorism has decided to bring together the people we call eggheads, that we actually look at this topic and see whether at the end of the day, the globe, the world, can benefit from the activities of the Institute. Now, this scourge has always made headlines, threatening, and we have issues where governments have been attacked, private business, even ordinary citizens in Nigeria cannot travel anymore, cannot move around, they cannot go to their farms, economy is dropping, and most of our countries, it has been one of the important threat to peace, security, and stability. As I speak, Nigeria is almost at the verge of disintegrating because we are suspecting each other. We're not even sure whether some aspects, they're not sponsoring this scourge against the others, So it's a very big issue in Nigeria today. So we're going to ask the fundamental questions. What does it really mean? What is terrorism? What is the nature of terrorism? Who or what is threatened by terrorism? Can you say people in Oslo or Copenhagen in Denmark, are they threatened by terrorism? So who are those people that are threatened by it? How are they threatened by it? By whom? And why are they threatened by terrorism? So by the time we look at these fundamentals, we will begin to understand what is financing and what is actually the meaning of the scourge itself. And at the end of the day, we're going to look at whether can we do something about it? Because this exercise is not just for us to come and waste our time and just, judge. Can we do something about it? Because we in Nigeria, we are feeling it. As I'm here now, I'm not even very sure. Maybe tomorrow, something will not happen where I am right now. So we are living in fear every day because there are a lot of weapons out there and people are just walking around in the night. As I'm here now, people are walking. It's about 1 a.m. in Nigeria and you're not sure what you can hear next. So how can we limit the impact of terrorism? And I will also continue to reiterate, why are we not looking at the enablers, which is small arms proliferation? Why are we not looking at it? Next slide, please. Now, we are going to highlight the essence of terrorism as an instrument to achieve political ends, even though I don't believe too much in that, because there's nothing political anymore in the world, because the world is no longer polarized as it used to be. Now we have almost just one world and everything is about mercantilism. Todd has mentioned that I'm going to discuss that, and it's my favorite topic, mercantilism. And we're going to see how it's affecting terrorism. So, and what has academia like us, what have we come up with? If the immediate action designed by terrorists is to have impact beyond the immediate victim, then we are beginning to look at that as terrorism. Because the action itself is not terrorism. It's when that action is having further impact, on victims that are not the beneficiary of that immediate action. That's when we are beginning to look at, terrorism. And as I said earlier, it can be passive and it can be active. So from African experience, empirical evidence shows that terrorism in Africa does not function without AK-47, a weapon that is manufactured outside the continent. And I'm going to now end up, I will reiterate again, on the small arms phenomenon, without which, even if you put millions, if you put millions on terrorism, you're going to find out that the money is still going to end up somehow, the money is going to end up in buying arms anyway. So financing is good, but I believe that the money eventually is going to end up in the hands of those people that are manufacturing arms. So the next slide will be, how do we block the channels without, please take note, affecting the social life of people? How can we block these channels without affecting business concern? Because arms manufacturing is a business. And if you say you're going to block the channels, you're going to block financing. Of course, it's going to affect some social life. It's going to affect business concerns. Arms manufacturers are going to kick. If I talk about AK-47 or bazooka or GPMG and some of those weapons that are being used by terrorists, if you do that, then it's going to significantly affect business as well. So, but let us look at the issues. We know that terrorist organizations, they need money. But we also know that they use that money to buy arms. So it's a bit myopic for pundits to think that, okay, we'll go after the financing. Okay, what are they using the money for? They're using it to buy arms. So why not look at the arms manufacturers instead of looking at the financing? So, and these are the areas we're going to look at. Third, I'm going to the next slide. The next slide is concluding that we are going to look at the demand side of the illicit trade by terrorists, because we also don't look at the demand side of the trade. Every time we're looking at the financing, we're looking at the money moving. We follow the money. Okay, now, when you follow the money, it's okay. Now, they still get the arms anyway because of trade by barter. In Africa, people they don't transfer money. They don't transfer money. They just simply carry the cash into the bush and give to the terrorists. And they use it to buy more arms. Sometimes the terrorists will tell you they don't even need cash and we don't need money. Give us arms. Okay, how do you pay for the arms? Okay, we have gold here. We have diamond there. We can make you to have access to the gas and the oil. So this is trade by barter. You don't need cash. Give us arms, you take gold. Now, the demand side of that trade is what the international community should begin to look at. Because common sense, they get the money, they get the arms. What do they do with it? They take hold of mines, gold mines, diamond mines, and people get to buy these diamonds. And they pay for the diamonds, and they pay for the gold, and they pay for the gas, and they pay for the crude oil. So we should not look at terrorist financing or terrorism financing just with one eye. And the next slide, because I don't really want to waste our time, the next slide is, what is terrorism financing? The field has been painted by Todd earlier. Is so difficult to police. And I can assure you that, because I will give you an example. In 2008, when we were doing an exercise on this issue of financing, and we observed that if I want to move $4 million from India to Nigeria, of course, the Indian authority did not allow us. They won't allow us to move $5 million cash. So we tried something. We checked an Indian company in Nigeria. Okay, we need $5 million. So where am I going to get it? Do you have any company in India? Do you have any business concern there that needs the same amount? So, oh, yes, of course. So how are you going to transfer the money? Oh, you have to pay a lot of taxes. You have to go through a lot of checks. You cannot transfer more than so. I said, so don't worry. Tell us where you need the money in India. And we discovered that the money we wanted to move from India, we could as well give it to somebody in India. And we collect the same amount in Nigeria. Now, tell me how you're going to trace that kind of business transaction. So I don't really want us at Global Counter-Terrorism Institute to just follow the trend and follow the group. Let us look at it more deeply, that financing terrorism is a difficult thing to follow. Because with time, I wanted to go into cryptocurrency issue, but I know that the next presenter is going to do justice to that. And I also listened to Todd attentively. I noticed he has done justice to that. So I'm not going to waste our time. But how are you going to handle, even Bennett has mentioned it, how are you going to handle cryptocurrency technology that is behind cryptocurrency? As you make this law or rules, the regulations, they just go behind it. So I asked a question to Todd privately. Are you going to favor regulation of cryptocurrency, or can we make bold to actually ban it outrightly? If we ban it outrightly, is it going to enhance or make us to develop the financial system for the next century? So these are the checks and balances. Because if you ban it, it's going to have a lot of impact on growth and development. If you don't ban it, then they're going to use it. The bad guys are going to use it to move money around. So that's why we should not continue to focus with one eye on issue of financing. We should look at those people that are manufacturing the weapons. Those guys are the people that are making it possible for terrorists to create fear in people like me. If I want to drive my car 100 miles from where I am now, I may not arrive at the other side because an illiterate who has not gone to school will jump on the highway and start firing at me just to kidnap me and collect ransom. So why are we not looking at that? And looking at the money, and we are spending so much energy, so much resources trying to follow the money. Terrorists has gone beyond that. So let's go to the next slide, which talk about terrorism funding and states. So this brings me to this slide, where violent Islamic organizations, for example, in Pakistan, have substantially democratic support, and they play an important role in preserving domestic peace and stability in Pakistan. The ISI and the terrorist groups, they work together. So what do you do to that? Since the Treaty of Westphalia, the issue of nation state, the issue of sovereignty, Pakistan have rights to classify any group to be terrorist group or not. United Nations has its own idea of what a terrorist organization is supposed to be, but Pakistan have a different idea. Do they have right to maintain those status quo? Look at Nigeria. They say Boko Haram is a terrorist organization. The government of Nigeria, or don't let me say the government of Nigeria, the politicians quickly change them to Fulani herdsmen. The Fulani herdsmen you hear on the news are people that they live, if I live here, if I take 100 meters now, they are around my houses. So if you say in Pakistan, the Islamic organizations are terrorist organizations, you classify them. Okay, they change name. They change name. The Boko Haram have changed name to Fulani herdsmen, but they're the same. Okay, Fulani herdsmen are not terrorist organizations, but Boko Haram is. So if you look at Iran also, look at the political and technical assistance that Iran is giving to Hamas, is giving Israel sleepless night. Look at the Qassam Brigade. I'm going to get to them the way they use cryptocurrency later. And look at the Hezbollah, the Shia movements. Look at the amount of political power they are wielding in Lebanon. And look at the Houthis that are fighting in Yemen. These are significant issues that we need to look at. How some of these states are preserving this terrorist organization because they foster their political goals. And they are often employed on important domestic political support. In Nigeria, election is coming, and you see all these people you call Fulani herdsmen, they are going to support the politicians to win the election. Now, look at the MENA region, the Middle East and North African region. It's a different game. So when I listen to Todd, and I listen to Bennett, and I listen to somebody speaking next from Hong Kong, and somebody speaking from London, that's why I told you that terrorism is governed by three things: the doctrine, the tempo, and the color. In every part of the world, they have different colors. Look at the Palestinians. I don't want to waste too much time on Palestinians. I mean, it's a very popular topic. So I just want us to look at how terrorist organizations within states are being preserved by state itself. And this is going to bring me to the next question, whether are we going to say terrorism is still a non-governmental event in our definition? I've been to Harvard, and we couldn't define what terrorism is. We say they are non-governmental organizations. They attack civilians. In Nigeria, Boko Haram attacks only, in fact, most of them attack only military targets. So if you attack military targets, maybe you are no longer a terrorist organization. So we have to look at this definition and try to look at it with two eyes and not from a particular side of the world. We should put people together from all over the world and let us look at it and rub minds. And any region should not feel superior to the other region. Otherwise, this scourge will continue for about 100 years to come. Next slide, please. That's about the white nationalist terror. We're talking about Middle East, we're talking about Boko Haram. Look at what happened in the US in the past few months. So it can be also domestic. And I don't want to talk too much because it's a very popular topic. You can see that some of these people, like what happened in Norway, the case of Anders Breivik, that killed about 77 people. That was shocking that such thing could happen in Norway. And when I was doing my research, I was in Oslo, I was in Copenhagen, I was in Sweden to actually measure why they are so peaceful and why Africa is not. And it was shocking to see what happened in 2011, where Breivik killed about 77 people. But the point I want to really bring up from that is that Breivik does not require so much money. He didn't require people to transfer money, huge money to him. So we should be careful the way we're looking at terrorism financing, because he killed about 77 people alone without finance from anybody. So we should begin to look at, but the graph is what is actually attracting. I don't know whether Todd is on that graph, on white nationalist terror, there's a graph that shows that terrorist incidents worldwide has dropped since 2016. And this, if you look at the data since 2016, it will show that terrorist incidents globally has dropped consecutively for about 5 years. But this does not represent what is happening in Africa. This does not represent what is happening in Yemen or in North Africa. I mean, we talk about the state of Azawad in northern Mali. So if you look at data like this, and professors come to discuss that, oh, we are not having peace, maybe because he's staying in the United States and you see that incident of terrorists, international terrorism has dropped, then you come up with a graph. It does not reflect the same picture, and it must be empirical for it to stand. So Nigeria has experienced the worst of times for the past 12 years, straight away, without any break. So the graph is actually misleading. Let's go to the next slide. We are talking about challenges here. Why is it difficult? I won't bother too much on this slide because Todd has already talked about the issue of Nigeria a lot. He has helped me with that. And we've talked about the misuse of humanitarianism. Another speaker mentioned that when you spend money on humanitarian action that doesn't actually get there, goes another way. They've talked about zakat and the issue of cryptocurrency, the new financial technology has been discussed. So they've helped me with that. But the non-cooperation of government is one thing that, although I mentioned it previously, but it's something we need to know that there's need for United Nations or maybe a larger supranational entity to actually look at some of these countries. And I don't want to mention names, or we know them, countries that are rogue countries that have continued to foster and basically grown these terrorist organizations and now set them loose. Most of the terrorists in Nigeria have been in the combat intelligence, and I know we arrested some of them, and you see that they are not from Nigeria. They're from Sudan, they're from Mali, they're from Niger, they're from Chad. You see, because the border are very porous, and I think somebody also mentioned that. So we have to look at beyond the financing aspect. We should look at these countries that are not cooperating, The last one I want to mention, which somebody also mentioned, that's third, is the issue of the traditional modes of financing. If you are tracing money all over the world, there are ways that we move money in Africa that it doesn't go through the banking system. And I think Todd has done a good job on that as well. The next slide is on Bitcoin for funding. Also, somebody has discussed that earlier today, so we don't need to really talk too much about that. The only thing I'd like to mention here is about regulation or outright banning of this method, because definitely the modus encourages, terrorism financing. Next slide. I don't know if Todd is on the same slide with me. Bitcoin and terrorism financing, regulations or prohibition. On the 5th of February 2021, the Central Bank of Nigeria released a letter addressed to banks and other financial institutions, which stated that dealing in cryptocurrencies and facilitating payment for cryptocurrency exchanges are prohibited. That's what the Central Bank of Nigeria just did on the 5th of February this month. They outrightly prohibited it. Why? Because Nigeria has the second largest Bitcoin market in the world. And I'm sure some of you may be surprised listening to me that Nigeria has the second largest Bitcoin market in the world, with over $500 million worth of Bitcoin trade in 5 years. So you can imagine the amount of corruption that this must have led to. People are talking about money laundering. I don't really, it's not the topic for the day, but it's related to terrorism finance. So you can imagine $500 million in the hands of terrorists, what they can do with it. So that's why I brought this as a caveat, whether we need to look at the issue of outright regulation or we prohibit this system. Of course, it has its own pros and cons. The Vice President of Nigeria came out about 3 days ago saying that we should focus more on regulation, not prohibition. And this is something that we may need to discuss further on. Next slide, please. I talk about the red flags. If you talk about terrorism financing, we should always look at the other side, the demand and supply of terror trade. It's like drugs. If there is no demand for drugs in any country, I think the supply side of the equation will either drop completely or the price will fall below the cost price. In other words, the long run average cost of producing maybe a ton of cocaine will be more than the price people are willing to buy, because we look at the demand side of consumption of drugs. Nobody is looking at the demand side of terror trade. If ISIS is marching across Syria, they march across Baghdad, they march across Libya, and they are selling oil, crude oil. And people from Europe, merchants from Europe, from North America, they are buying these products and making money. Why are we not looking at that side? I remember when I was in Liberia, we went to fight in Liberia sometimes, and we were making noise about Blood Diamond, where the rebels were mining diamonds, and people from Belgium, Brussels, and so they were buying. And the more they buy, the more they have money to buy arms to fight the ECOMOG troops. So I'm very particular in this program because the Global Counter-Terrorism Institute is different, because our perspective is deep and it is based on experience. Because we have fought in Liberia, we fought in Sierra Leone, we fought Boko Haram for the past 15 years, and we know where it pains. Let us be looking at the demand and supply of terror trade and de-emphasize terrorism financing. People are financing it because we are not regulating the trade. Until you regulate what encourages them to continue to foster, then we are not going to do justice to it. So I'd like to go to the next slide because I know our time is well spent, and that's table 1. This table is meant for the students, not for technocrats and senior colleagues that are watching this program, but for the students. If you look at table 1, I don't know, Todd, are you on table 1?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were sleeping. Okay, table 1, you look at the first column is terrorism. And under it, there's a question there. There's no right answer for the students. The first question there is Boko Haram suicide bomber attacks a major market in Nigeria. So your answer should be either yes or no, because the question is that terrorism? So if you look at the question, is that terrorism? That's the question. And your answer is yes or no. So I repeat, the first caveat is Boko Haram suicide bombers attacks a major market in Nigeria. Is that terrorism? So you keep your answer. The second one is also about terrorism. Al-Shabaab attacks a popular tourist market in Mogadishu, killing 80 foreign tourists. Is that terrorism? Yes or no? The fourth one is Boko Haram attack a military barrack in Kaduna, Nigeria, killing 45 soldiers and cutting away military hardware. That act, is that terrorist attack? Is it terrorism? The last one on terrorism is a nuclear scientist was murdered in Iran by a suspected foreign country. A nuclear scientist was murdered in Iran by a suspected foreign country. The question again, is it terrorism? Yes or no? So that's the end of the quiz on terrorism. The next one is terrorism financing. So we're going to have the same answer, yes or no. So the first one is a foreign country organize, equip, and finance a group of nihilists to disrupt Russian influence in Afghanistan. The question is that terrorism financing? Yes or no? The next one on terrorism financing. Weapons was supplied to ISIL to destabilize Syria by foreign interests. Weapons was supplied to ISIL to destabilize Syria by foreign interests. Is that terrorism financing? Yes or no? The third one, training and equipment was provided for fighters in northern Mali. Training and equipment was provided for fighters in northern Mali by proxy. Is that terrorism financing? The last question, which concerns Nigeria. They say I have 5 minutes to go. Todd, you spent more than 1 hour. The last question is, Nigeria was denied weapons to fight Boko Haram due to human rights abuse. Nigeria was denied weapons to fight Boko Haram due to human rights abuse. Is that terrorism financing? So let me now go to the next slide. Todd, the next slide is about concepts of money laundering and terrorism financing. You have done justice to that. So let's move on to the next slide. Terrorism. I'm asking, that's the next one, is a state-centric phenomenon. Are you on that slide?
Yes.
Terrorism, state-centric phenomenon. Now, when you look at what is happening in Middle East, you want to see whether it is a non-state action or state action. So I will leave that one there. Let's go to the next one. This is what concerns third world countries. The next slide is about there's no more dangerous menace to civilization than a government of incompetent, corrupt, or vile men. So this is where we are talking about blocking this terrorism financing. When you have a corrupt and vile people in government, you are going to actually, increase the spread of militarization in that country because the environment must be right before you can have people that are willing and able to die for other ideological reason, religious reason, political, social, or for finance, So it's about good governance. And this brings me to the next slide, Trinity concept. That's the next slide, Todd. Jordan's continuum in international peace. This is why I'm here. The bottom line is that we want global peace. And if you want global peace, what we should look at 30,000 feet, I'm going to your level now. Bad leadership, mercantilism, and weak civil society. If the students ask questions, I'm going to elaborate on this. These are the 3 fundamentals that governs terrorism, nihilism, banditry, whatever ills that we have in the society. It is governed by bad leadership, mercantilism, and weak civil society. Next slide, please. Next slide is strategic overview. The strategic overview is a comparative analysis of 3 countries. I mean, this is something we can do when we're in the class because it's something you have to do some little regression analysis, We have 3 countries here. If you look at this, we have Nigeria, Denmark, and DRC Congo. Denmark is a control experiment. If you look at the fundamentals I mentioned earlier, which is the Jordan's continuum, is reflected here in terms of 3 indices. The 3 indices that governs all the challenges we have, I won't say globally, but in most parts of the world, are enshrined in the Jordan's continuum and is governed by Corruption Perception Index, Human Development Index, and Democracy Index. And it doesn't matter which country, if you regress those data, you are going to get from UNDP sites because they are, always giving us this data. Or you go to the Economics Intelligence Unit, you're going to get this data. If you regress it with the equation I'm going to show you, you can predict with certainty empirically if a country is going to be at peace or is tending towards anarchy or is going to be a failed state. So these are the calculations that the Global Counter-Terrorism Institute has come up with to determine what global peace is and what is operational peace index for each countries. And is patented, and anybody that wants to have this should have to talk to Todd to be able to have it. So when you do the calculation, the next slide, Todd, where you have the graphs. This is the answer you get if you regress the earlier slide. Are you there, Todd?
I'm here.
Where you have 92.5% for Denmark.
Yes.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you have 33.7. So these are figures you get to show you that all this is over 10, but you can regress it, into percentage. So you can see Denmark's score 92.5. That means it's have a high pedigree of peace in that country. And when you look at the DRC Congo, you can see 24.5%, 3% shows that that country is actually in a state of anarchy and a state of war. And the equation you're going to use is just below there. So the takeaway is blocking terrorism financing is governed by strong legislation, blocking the demand side of illicit trade in weapons, including drugs, and promoting democratic principles. If you look at the Nordic countries, you will see that Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, and Norway, including Greenland, and you see that they're very much at peace, relatively, to even the United States. So if you want to block all this, you must have very strong legislation. You must block the trade in weapons and drugs, and you must promote democratic principle. And the last one, takeaway, Todd, the last slide, before thank you, I said, takeaway, terrorism financing. Blocking terrorist financing will mean ensuring that small arms proliferation is abated. Without small arms, terrorism globally will reduce by 80%. And this is a research that has been done. If you remove all the small arms, there are more than 100 million out there. In West Africa alone, we have more than 6 million. If you remove all these small arms, terrorism globally will reduce by 80%. That's the takeaway for this lecture. The last one is that finance is used to procure weapons to perpetrate fear. Thus, the demand side of terrorist proceeds, such as blood diamond, must be legislated upon. Don't look at the financing, look at the illicit trade carried out by terrorists and those people that are demanding for those trades for easy money. That is where we should look at. By and large, I think we are going to get there. Our time is well spent. I'm sorry if I've exceeded my time. I want to thank you for listening, and I'm willing to take questions.
Thank you, Professor Kunle Olawumni, for a very insightful presentation on blocking terrorism financing. Are there any other questions? Please send them across to the chat box.
I did think I saw a question from Stephen. Maybe
I think he did answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, he did answer that. Yeah. Okay. There's no any other questions. What I'd like to do is we're coming to an end to our two-day seminar. We've had some very great speakers and very fantastic presentations yesterday and today from Professor Kunle Olawumni, from Amanda, from Todd, and from Vineth, and also a video presentation from Mohamed Ahmed. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you and also our participants for coming and taking your time to attend this 2 days presentation. And we highly appreciate your attendance. As mentioned, that this has been recorded and it will be shared. I will now pass this to Todd to close this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed.